The following is rated TV MA and is intended only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion advised.
Man, what's up, talk radio folks? Tonight is trial and error testing thing. I've been doing that for the past few days, but I wanted to open the show. I didn't do this last night, but today's March 6th, so it's Time Warp Thursday. Got a guest, Randy Overbeck, tonight. He's an author. I pre-recorded the interview, so, hopefully it goes smoothly. March 6, 2025, so we are 17.81% through the year of 2025. And that's 9 weeks and 2 days, 65 days total, 1,560 hours, and 93,600 minutes, and 5,616,000 seconds. So that's the numbers for the year so far. But like I say, Time Warp Thursday, special guest, and when I do the collab cam thing on Streamlabs, it tends to give echo. You'll hear like echo, and the guest mentioned it, and somebody had posted yesterday during my live stream that there was an echo. I'm still looking and trying to figure out how to fix that to get rid of the echo. So I got to just kind of read up some stuff and, try to figure it out. So hopefully I can figure it out and not seem like too much of a fool. But anyways, we'll get to the interview. As I said, May 6th, Randy Overbeck. He's an author of paranormal books and stuff like that. And you'll see scrolling on the bottom, coming up guests too. So I got guests coming up too. So I got to work on the sound on the collab cam because it echoes and stuff like that. But I will be back after the interview and to close out the show for tonight. So it's half live, or a little bit live, but mostly pre-recorded stuff. So we'll get to that. Okay. Enjoy.
I'm getting a little echo on my side. Is that you hearing that or not?
Yeah, I kind of do too. I'm not sure.
Because it said that echo control was on.
I got to work on that a little bit. So I see here.
Let's see what it says. Oh, I can't do that. Okay. Only thing on my screen is mute or stop video.
Okay, is that any better?
Is it still bouncing? A little bit.
But I'm trying. I still got to learn my software and all that.
Everybody's got to learn.
Well, we'll go with what we got.
Okay.
So, anyways, I looked over I was reading over your website, and it was talking about you were a teacher for a long time before you switched over to becoming an author. So, what made you want to switch?
Well, I've always been a storyteller, and I've always been a writer. So what happened was in my career is I spent 12 years as a teacher and a college professor and spent 28 years running school districts. So I was superintendent or assistant superintendent at 4 different school districts over those 28 years. And it just so happens that whether you're a teacher or whether you're an administrator, you do a ton of writing. You write lesson plans, and you write reports, you write memos, you write agendas, you write articles for the newspaper. You name it, I was doing writing. So all of that time, I was really honing my skills to write. And when I was a teenager, I really wanted to write. In fact, I thought I was going to write the next great American novel, but the call for teaching came, and I answered that and really enjoyed those years. But as I got closer to retirement, I started to segue from a lot of the technical writing that I was doing into fictional writing. And it was pretty much more or less a natural procession, because a lot of the skills I used in my job, like researching a subject, researching an area, is what I used when I dove into and started creating my novels.
Yeah. But let's see. If your younger self met you today, what would surprise them the most about your career now?
Oh, that's nobody's asked me that question, and I've done a lot of these, Jonathan. Probably my younger self would say that I should have carved some time out of my professional schedule, and started writing earlier. Because I've been at this fiction writing now pretty steady for more than a decade. And I can really feel that my skill level is increasing as my writing gets better, as I do more writing. So if I had just started that work, even on a very limited basis, 20, 30 years ago, who knows where I'd be today? That's probably I was working 50, 60 hours a week. I had 3 children I was raising with my wife. So there wasn't really a lot of time, but you always can make time for what's important. And I probably would have told my younger self, just even if it's only a half an hour, turn the TV off, go do this. Take some time and read. That's probably what I'd say.
Good answer. I like that. Tell your younger self to take some time to do something you like. So then, what sparked your study of ghosts and spirits and such?
Well, it's an interesting story behind that, because it's kind of an accident, maybe. An accident in terms of what got it started. So I share this at some of my presentations that I do all over the country. Back in 14 or 15, I forgot what year it was, I was working then on the first novel in my Haunted Shore mystery series. Although I didn't know it was a series then. I didn't know. All I knew was it was my first mystery novel I was creating. I hadn't, at that point, I had some of the plot down, kind of figuring out. I knew what the murder was going to be like. I kind of knew where I was locating it, but I hadn't got any ghost part at all in there. I was at a writing conference, and I was, if you've been to one of these conferences, you know how this happens. So I'm scheduled, a conference that you schedule, I want to go to this session, so one of the sessions I had picked to go to, the person got sick or didn't show up. I don't remember what, but they canceled the session. So I'm sitting there going, okay, I got to go to something else. It just so happens that a ghost hunting group called the Central Indiana Paranormal Society was doing a presentation at this fiction conference. And I went, okay, I kind of believe in ghosts. I think I'll go. And what they presented just absolutely blew me out of the water. I was so impressed with their scientific approach to how they went about doing it, with the details that they had, with what I learned in that very first time. It just whetted my appetite. And I started going, what if I change this mystery up so that the mystery also included a ghost? So that's kind of how it got started. And then from there, I just did my thing. I started doing research, started looking up more, started talking to more groups, trying to keep myself informed, separating the kind of crazy wild myth stuff from what do we have some kind of documentation of what's really happened. I went and researched and found actual authenticated photos of ghosts. So it just kind of it whet my appetite at just the right time. And I have been working on expanding my knowledge ever since.
Yeah, I've always been interested in ghosts and spirits and stuff. So, and I don't know if you've had like experiences where you had sightings, but
before the experience, the conference I was telling you about, the answer is no. Since then, I've gone on a number of ghost walks, and on one of the ghost walks, which happened to be in Nashville, I did have a sighting of one actual ghost. Actually, it was an orb, but in a place that had been a history of being haunted in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah. But the funnest thing is having kind of like ghost encounters, because me and friends back in the day, we'd go kind of ghost hunting and end up at like old mental hospitals where it was known to be haunted, and we'd see spirits kind of hanging around the mental hospital, and we'd be like, whoa, okay. So it's kind of always fun to go searching for the spirits, and if you see them, it's cool. If you don't, you still have to sit there and say, do they exist or do they not exist? And so
one of the things that I learned that was pretty well dismissed any doubt that I had. When I did this research, I didn't know if you know this or not, but I found out that every religion on the planet, no matter where you live, has part of their belief system is tied to ghosts. So Buddhists have a belief in ghosts, Hindus have a belief in ghosts, Judaism has a belief in ghosts, Christians have a belief in ghosts. What I learned was that the beliefs are not, there are overlaps, but they're not the same.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's such a prevalent part of every religion's mythology kind of reinforces the fact that this is not what I tell my groups when I speak to them, this is not child's play or a Halloween prank. This is something that's very much a part of our culture, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. They've done several surveys recently. In the last 20 years, they've done 2 surveys that I found. One of them surveyed Americans and asked, do you believe in ghosts? They just simply said, do you believe in ghosts? And both surveys showed that about 50% of the Americans responded yes, they believe in ghosts. So that tells you how large of a believing population there is. So it's not just something for weirdos or nerds or anybody on the fringes. It's pretty much across all society.
Yeah. Saw that your newest book is Cruel Lessons.
Yeah, which is not a ghost story. So I actually have 2 series. The one I mentioned called the Haunted Shore Mystery Series. And I have a second series called Lessons in Peril. What ties them together is that all of these books are set in school settings. So I take what I had learned from 40 years of working with kids and teachers and parents and administrators, and weave those into stories in each of the books. The Cruel Lessons, that series, are amateur sleuth mysteries that are a little dark. They're a little. The publishers call them atmospheric mysteries.
Yeah.
They're not cozies. They're not light and fluffy. They're not that kind. The Haunted Shore Mysteries, which the ones I was talking about, soon my newest entry will be in that. So I have a fourth entry coming out in that series that will be out this summer sometime. Publisher hasn't given me a date yet, but sometime this summer. And
that's cool.
Those are destination. So if you haven't had enough time to dive into, so each of the books is a destination mystery ghost story. So what I did, this was my kind of goal when I started out, was I wanted to find places that were kind of like undiscovered gems of resort places that not a lot of people know about. And so I went and found and then researched each one of these locations. So the first book takes place on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay. Now, I don't expect, because you are out there in California, you don't know that, but the Chesapeake Bay has the largest shoreline of any place in the United States. There's more water property there than anywhere else. It's a really remarkable place, and it's one of the few places that's still relatively undeveloped, so you don't get this big commercialized stuff. And it is an absolutely gorgeous place in the fall. The woods around the lake, just the color's amazing. So that's when I set my book, was in October of 1996. 1996. I'll tell you about why in a minute. Then each book after that is the same characters, same central characters in a different location. So the main character is a high school teacher and a football coach, and his mystery solving uncovers some skeletons in the closet of the town that he was in. So he loses his job, so he's out looking for something else to make money, and he goes to this town called Cape May, which is the second one is called. So the first one is Blood on the Chesapeake. The second one is Crimson at Cape May. Again, you're a California guy, you don't know this, but Cape May is at the very bottom of New Jersey. So New Jersey's got a little peninsula that comes down. It's the very bottom. It is the oldest resort in the United States. People have been coming to that beach for 150 years for vacation and stuff. And but if you're not from New York or New Jersey or Connecticut, most people don't know about this place. It also happens to be the most haunted place on the eastern seaboard. So those two things made it a perfect place to set the second story. It's also the story also a romantic arc. So in the first story, Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I lost you for a minute there.
That's okay.
You
I was
okay?
going to say also, I'm actually in Washington State, not California. So,
Washington State, okay. Well, I'm thinking about setting a future one in Washington State later. But so anyway, that's the second one, and I was saying it's a romantic arc. So they meet in the first book, fall in love in the second book. The third book, they're on the honeymoon in Florida. I found this really cute town in Florida on the Gulf Coast, about an hour north of Tampa. It's a place called Crystal River. Okay, so that's Scarlet at Crystal River, and that's it's one of the things that drew me to that. It's the only place in America you can swim with manatees. So it's a really neat place. So those are the three. The new one that's coming out this summer is located on the western shore of Michigan, because my main character is actually from Michigan. It's called Red Shadows at Saugatuck. Saugatuck is a resort artsy town on the western shore of Michigan, on Lake Michigan itself. And in that story, we follow the couple because now they've been married for 7 years, and they have a 5-year-old son in the newest book. And the 5-year-old son, like his father, can see ghosts. So it's a very, very interesting wrinkle in their story. That's kind of a long-winded way to get to what you were answering, but and each one of those has a ghost at the center of the murder mystery. In fact, Daryl finds out about the murder because the ghost starts haunting him.
yeah.
And in each case, he doesn't know anything about it. This ghost haunts him. He doesn't know who the ghost is. He's a fish out of water in each case. So he's new to each one of these locations. He doesn't know who this ghost is. And then eventually he first figures out who the ghost is and then figures out they've been murdered. And then the rest of the tale is him trying to figure out who's responsible for the murder.
Sounds interesting. I'm going to have to start purchasing some books from some of my guests here and start reading.
One of the things that are different, you're going to find different about my books than other ghosts, is all of the activities that the ghosts do in my book are based on what's actually been documented by ghost hunters of what ghosts actually do. So in other words, the ghosts don't solve any mystery. The ghosts they're not whispering in his ear about it. None of those things. The ghosts are cryptic. They only give enough information for Daryl to kind of figure out, well, what's my next step, which is exactly how, as I have talked with ghost hunters, that's what they'll tell me. So how the ghosts interact with people in my story is how the ghost hunters have documented of how ghosts interact when they investigate a haunted house, or they investigate a restaurant, or like the one you were saying about a sane asylum.
Yeah, you get the weird stuff in insane asylums. You see spirits standing in between trees and just watching you as you leave, and it's freaky.
Well, the location itself is really creepy. We have one that they just tore down here that I use in one of my presentations. It was in Louisville, and it had one of the ghosts that frequented the place, and there's an actual photograph of this ghost. Was a nurse that was there and hung herself. There's a long story behind it, but she got pregnant by a doctor there. The doctor disowned her. She was angry. She got upset. She went and hung herself at the location. And people who visited it before the place was torn down said that they saw this ghost, and there's actually an actual photograph.
Yeah.
Pretty chilling. One of the things that's different that I want to talk about that kind of will help dispel some myths, most of what people read in books that are called ghost stories have no basis in fact or documented reality. No offense to Stephen King, but ghosts are not crazy, cruel, mean, out to kill you. That's just, it makes for good fiction. He's a wonderful writer, but it has nothing to do with what I've learned from all these ghost hunters. I've learned the existence of a ghost that wants to do harm. The examples are very few. It's hard to find any documented example that's actually true.
Yeah.
And what is even more common in writing is what's called a cozy murder, ghost mystery. I don't know if you probably haven't read those, but that's what I call that. I call that Casper the Friendly Ghost. So this is where the ghost is the ghost of my grandmother who owned this bookstore, and she helps me solve the mystery of the murder and stuff. There's absolutely no basis for that at all. Again, it makes for fun reading. It's kind of wink, wink. We kind of enjoy that, but there's no reality behind it. Yeah.
I think most ghost stories are pretty, in a good term, like my mom, after my stepdad had passed away, she said she saw him walking through the house. So, and like kind of, I guess, saying goodbye, giving his, goodbye sticker or whatever.
Those are the kinds of things when, like, I have two presentations that I do. One's called Things Still Go Bump in the Night, which I've shared about 150 times all over the country, including, I haven't been to Washington, only in California on the West Coast, but and I would say 1 out of every 3 times, 1 out of every 4 times, when I'm done, somebody will come up and tell me a story, just like your mother-in-law, just same thing. They'll say, I laid in bed, my husband had died 2 weeks earlier or whatever. I laid in bed and I could have sworn I woke up, there he was standing at the foot of the bed. usually with some kind of message.
Yeah. But what has been one of your biggest influences on your career?
I would have to say, one of the things that I've benefited the most in my career was learning from other expert writers. So one of the pieces of advice I give to emerging writers is, if you haven't done this, spend a little money and go to one of the really good writers conferences. There are lots of great writers conferences, and I've been to 4 or 5 different conferences, and I've seldom been disappointed. And at those conferences, you meet best-selling authors. I've met Janet Ivanovich, who wrote the Stephanie Plum novels, of which there's 40. I met C.J. Box, who writes stories about Montana and Colorado. I've met Kent Kruger, who writes about Minnesota. He's one of the best-selling mystery writers today. I wrote, and each one of those, I learned from every one of those. Kent has been the biggest influence because he's taken a personal interest. He wrote a blurb for my very first book, Blood on the Chesapeake, and I have a new book that's going to come out, a history, and he wrote a blurb for that as well, historical fiction. So he's pretty much taken me under his wing, given me advice, which I've tried to follow, and then just kept encouraging me. So those I think have had the biggest influence. It kind of dispels the myth of, well, I could never do what they're doing. When they tell you, well, here's how I started. I just started. Kent's a very interesting story. He started about 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. He's the same age as I am. He's in his mid-70s. And he wanted to write, and he had a full-time job, just like I did. But what he did was he got up early, because he's a morning person, and for an hour and a half every day, he went to the coffee shop and wrote. And that was enough to get him going every day. And he's talked about how important it is to write every single day.
Yeah.
I've tried to take that advice and try to use it. So those are the kind of things that have been a major influence on me, both writing and staying at it. This book that's coming out will be my 6th. I have another one already finished that's scheduled for the next year. That'll be my 7th. So I'm not going to make it like 20 or 30 or 40, but there's a couple more in the pipeline.
Yeah. Going along with kind of my subject lines for these type of shows, if you were to travel in time, like do time travel, would you rather go to the past or the future?
I'm such a history buff, I'd probably rather go to the past, as long as I get to come back.
I always said I'd probably go to the future, see what's coming up in future.
Well, I've done so much research. So all of the novels take place in the 90s and early 2000s, and the historical fiction that I wrote actually takes place during the Revolutionary War. So I've spent a lot of time researching different periods of time, and I'm kind of a history buff anyway. Wherever I go, if I travel someplace, what I'm most interested in is the history of the place. In fact, what really, when I'm traveling to lots of places where I've gone ghost tours, most people don't realize it, but ghost tours are really just history tours of the area, that which ghosts have some are woven into the actual fabric of the story.
Yeah.
So when we went to Santa Fe, we did a ghost tour, but the ghost tour was really a history of the town of Santa Fe, and I'm kind of hooked on that. I really like that a lot. Having done a lot of research for this novel in the Revolutionary War, I was just fascinated by what went on there, and I would love to have been a fly on the wall and actually see, how we should never have won the Revolutionary War. We had no chance whatsoever, but we did anyway. And the fact that what we were able to pull off is so remarkable. I would love to have been there. It was only 7 years, so I would love to have been there to watch that happen.
Yeah, that would be interesting. A good way to just kind of see the things that you read and heard about.
Except that it was a very stinky, smelly time. So I don't know. Showers, that would be a little weird to handle. People always stunk, and cities were absolutely horrible. Odors were terrible and stuff. Things we don't know about now, which I learned when I did the research.
Yeah. Let's see. What would be one of your like favorite mistakes you've made in your life? Like something that was a mistake in your life, but it's kind of a favorite because it helped you move forward.
That's a good question. I often talk about that. I don't know that this is a mistake, but it was a problem. So I've been fired, if that's the right word, or lost my job. Sometimes wasn't fired. Sometimes just phased out, but twice. And in both cases, even though it was horrendous, I mean, I got a family to raise. I'm worried about how I'm feeding my children and stuff. But in both cases, it turned out to be the very best thing that could have happened, because I ended up getting something way better than what I had before, because it forced me out of my comfort zone and made me start reaching for other possibilities.
Yeah.
I think that's, and I do agree with the saying. I say this all the time. When God closes the door, he opens a window. Now, sometimes it's up pretty high, and sometimes you got to squeeze your butt through the window, but there's usually a window there, and that's what I found in my case. So yeah. I'll tell you what, this would probably be of interest to your listeners. So because I go to all these different places, one of the things I do is I research the ghosts in each place. Now, the ghosts in my stories are all fictional. There's no basis for them in the lore and anything else.
Yeah.
But I'll just talk a little bit about Cape May, because that's the one that's the most fun. So Cape May has like 24 documented ghosts that people have some kind of proof of their existence in different places in the town. Town's really old. You'd think people are coming there for 150 years. It's been there a long time. So what I did was I researched some of those ghosts. I talked with somebody who's a local expert. I read books that are there. I became friends with the person who's head of the chamber or visitors bureau. I forget what they call it. And I ended up including 2 of those actual ghosts in my story. So it was kind of fun. So, nobody owns the ghost, so it's not a copyright issue or anything like that, because it's part of the common lore L-O-R-E, common lore of the town about here's one example that's in my story. So there's a ghost that appears from time to time in this one tavern, restaurant, whatever, bar. And I really liked the bar. Has a great setting. It has neat murals. It was really good for a good place to set the story. So I decided, okay, well, I'm going to set the story and have the ghost in there. This ghost is the ghost of a lady of ill repute from the 19th century. Okay, during the late 1800s, 1870 or something. I don't remember. And she was part of a troupe that did plays, but then on the side she had another job on the side. Anyway, and she appears from time to time in this restaurant, and people see her, and then she disappears. And I'm going, well, that would be a perfect one. So what I did was I used what the locals had come to believe about this particular ghost, and then I wove her into the story by having her leave a cryptic note for my protagonist about the mystery he's trying to solve. So that's an example of kind of what I do when I'm going to a new place, looking for some options that I can build into the story.
Yeah, always looking for experiences to write about that you
Yeah.
can kind of use for your
And if I
stories.
can get something that's ghost related, it's even better. That's
Yeah.
kind of how I look at it. Yeah.
Well, that's a good way to go about it. So, how long does it usually take, say, to write a novel?
That's a very good question, and it's a very hard answer. Um, the first novel took over 18 months to write. And that's not even counting the research time. So when somebody asks that, well, it depends on what they mean by that. Do you mean when you first started putting words on paper, how long did it take from then for that to get finished and published? Or do you mean when you first started with the idea and then started researching? So I'm just talking about the second part, when you actually started writing. So in that case, it was my first, it was my first in a long time. I had written one 10 years earlier, but I had been working on it, and I had to keep working on it. And so it took me a long time. It took me about 18 months. Just to give you an example, and people would really appreciate this. This is an actual true story. I was doing one of my talks, and a local newspaper reporter, this was before a pandemic, so probably 19, attended the presentation, and I did my little thing, and then afterwards she talked to me. It turned out that she was a kid going to college. She was probably 19 or 20, and she was in a creative writing class. And she stopped me afterwards and she said, "Now, I don't normally read ghost story mystery." She said, "But because I knew I was covering you, I read yours." I said, "Well, thanks, I appreciate it." She said, "I really liked it." She said, "I got to tell you something." She said, "Your first chapter," she said, "in my creative writing class, where the professor is talking about what you need to do in a first chapter. And she said, your first chapter has everything he said you should have in a first chapter." I said, "You know why it has everything?" She said, "No, why?" I said, it was my 14th first chapter." She said, "What?" I said, there were 13 first chapters before that one got. I said, they either been moved to a different part of the book, or they were discarded, or whatever. Some of them didn't end up in the book at all. She said, "Really?" And I share that just as a way of kind of sharing with your viewers that when you say, "Well, how long did it take?" Well, that's why it took 18 months, because I kept revising until I thought it was as good as it possibly could be. The other books in the series did not take that long. So the second book, Crimson at Cape May, took about 9 months to write from start to finish. And the last book, the last book out, the one from Florida at Scarlet Crystal River, I actually did the research 2 weeks before they closed everything down for the pandemic. I got very lucky. We were just there. I came home, and 2 weeks afterward, they closed it down. So that book I actually wrote in 3 months.
Wow.
Because I'm home. There's nothing else to do. I just stay at it. The best way I could probably, now if you're not a mystery reader, you don't know this, but one of the most famous mystery writers is a guy by the name of Robert Parker. Robert Parker kind of reinvented the mystery novel in the 70s. Anyway, 70s and 80s. I did a lot of research on him. It took him one whole year to write one book. He started on a certain date of the year, and he would have it finished and it would take him almost the whole year. And he worked 8 hours a day every day to write that. So people don't really have an idea of how long it takes really great authors to create the books that they enjoy. Lee Child, you know who Lee Child is? The guy who does Reacher?
Yeah.
Okay, he's about the same way, although he spends 6 months researching and then 6 months actually doing the writing.
And so, I guess it just depends on, your style and who's doing it. It could be different time lengths, determining on who you are writing.
Yeah, and obviously if you get better, the writing flows easier.
Yeah.
You don't have blocks where you're going, I don't know where I'm going next with this story, that kind of stuff. and some people are better at first drafts than others. Mine is never good enough at first draft. Mine is probably 4 or 5. Even now, it's still probably the 4th or 5th draft. It's not the 14th draft like it was when I started, but that definitely takes multiple draft times.
Yeah.
How about let me since your audience is often tuning in looking to learn new things about paranormal, let me talk about a little bit about what I've researched in ghosts, some of those things.
Okay.
Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah.
Okay, so for example, here's a few of the things that I learned. It is not universally agreed, but the consensus among most ghost hunters is that ghosts haunt the place of their death most often. Every once in a while, you'll find a ghost is haunting someplace where they didn't die, but that's rare. But in most cases, the belief is that ghosts are here because they have some kind of unfinished business. The unfinished business could be something about their life, or it could be something about someone else's life. And this is an example that I give in my talks. So I talk about famous people who we know that believe in ghosts and will tell you their stories about ghosts. One of the ones I talk about is a NASCAR driver, Junior. You know who Junior is?
Yeah, Dale Earnhardt Jr.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. Okay, this is a real true story. You can look it up and research. In 2003, I have it on the screen so I don't have to remember, but I think it's 2003, Dale and his pit crew were doing practice runs on a track in South Carolina. It wasn't a race. They were just out there working the car. I don't know the details about there's some kind of mechanical failure, and the car flipped and caught on fire with Dale in it. The pit crew is running across the track to get to their boss, who they think is dead. They find the boss about 20 yards from the burning car, unconscious in the grass. Later, when he comes through, he tells them that a ghost pulled him out of the burning car.
Huh.
And in an interview, he said the ghost was the ghost of his father.
Cool.
So that's an example of truly unfinished business.
Yeah.
One of the other things I learned that I thought was really interesting, that they have come to the belief about that ghosts exist mostly at night because they are as afraid of interacting with humans as humans are of running into them.
Yeah.
So the reason we see ghosts at night is because they generally don't go out during the day, and because they're trying to avoid human contact if they can. How about have other guests talked about the temperature thing?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, this is something that I actually learned at that first session that I was telling you about. It was one of the things that blew me away. So I remember at this point, I am not a full-fledged believer. I still have a little bit of skepticism, and this is the part that they actually blew me out of the water. So what they did is they said, okay, we were asked to investigate this room that was supposed to be haunted. And, they told us the dimensions of the room. I don't remember now. Not a very big room. And they did what was normal. So when they go to investigate, I'm sure you've had these guys on before, but when they go to investigate, they bring a video camera, photographic camera, and audio equipment, and they bring temperature equipment, a temperature reader. And they have some other electronic equipment that I can't go into right now, but the temperature thing is what I want to focus on. So what they've done, and this was the group that I was talking to you about, the Central Indiana Paranormal Society, but I found that other groups did the same thing. So they happen to like an analog temperature reader. Now, you remember what those analogs are, the ones used to be on the side of the building, and they have a dial, and the temperature thing goes like this on there.
Yeah.
Okay. So So there's no human error. They take a second video camera and it runs for the 3 hours. They do the intervention, the investigation between midnight and 3 in the morning. That's standard. So, and for those 3 hours, they put this camera on this temperature thing. And they're telling us all this as part of this presentation that I'm at. They said, now I want you to watch the video. So we're watching the video, and the video is just this video of a temperature, okay? And the temperature in the room was like, 62 or something. I don't know. It was a vacant room. And we're watching this. Just watch. In 20 seconds, the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. It went from, the little needle went, and then it stayed down about 2 minutes and came back up. Then they fast forward the video 2 more times. So this actually happened 3 different times in the 3 hours. Each time the same, regular temperature, 60 some degrees. In an enclosed room, temperature drops to 42 or 41 and back up again. They explained to us that this was, they believe, the ghost entering and leaving the room. For some reason, they don't know why, but ghost presence are changing the temperature. So after they told me about this, I started researching that. I found out that that is the single most common documentation of ghosts, and it has been documented thousands of times all over the world. The parameters has to be a closed space, so there's no way to change the temperature. You couldn't have a draft of wind blowing in, for example. Okay, and it has to be documented in the same way, where there's no human error. Nobody's recording this. Somebody is actually videoing this. And I found this happens over and over and over again all over the world. And they believe it is the single most common example of the presence of some kind of spirit coming into the room for a while and then leaving the room.
Yeah. And that's a weird thing that just the temperature fluctuates. That's kind of
there's no scientific explanation for it. You can't. Now, I don't want to put these guys on. They had other things. They had a recording of the ghost that they said they recorded in that space. Okay, and it was the voice of a young woman, saying help me, or something like that. But I'm still a little cynical. I'm going, well, you could fake that. You get some girl to put, but I don't know how they fake the temperature thing. I mean, and then when I read that it happens over and over and over again, I'm going, well, then that pretty well convinces me.
Yeah.
Now, if you run into that, I've on several of the ghost walks, they've talked about that same thing. Have you've not run into that in the ghost walks you've been on?
Not really. I usually just do my solo thing, kind of going places looking for ghosts and reading up on ghosts, and just I don't really do the group hunts or nothing like that. I mean, I've thought about trying it, but I haven't done it.
It's an interesting experience. Now, some of them are very tongue-in-cheek. They're kind of make-believe kind of, but others are very close to the historical record, and they talk about the one we were in Savannah and Charleston were very interesting. The Charleston one, there's part of the ghost tour that was about Edgar Allan Poe. And Edgar Allan Poe, according to the lore in the town, fell in love with a girl. Edgar Allan Poe, I don't know if you know this or not, he was a poor guy that was actually adopted by another family. And he didn't have any money. And he was in the military in Charleston, Navy, I think. Anyway, he fell in love with this daughter of a plantation owner, and they wanted to run away together, but the plantation owner wouldn't let her and locked her up, and she committed suicide. So that part they kind of know. Well, anyway, and then Edgar Allan Poe wrote a poem to her called Annabel Lee. Her name was Anna, and then the ghost story showed us her tomb, and then said people have seen her sitting on top. It's a mausoleum kind of tomb. They've seen her sitting on top of of her mausoleum from time to time,
Yeah.
still haunting. So some ghost stories they're kind of like, really, guys? Some of them, they actually do it for comedy, which is okay too. But some of them have done a really nice job of blending the documented stories of ghosts with the history of the area.
Yeah. Well, I've just always loved to studying a ghost and going to look for ghosts. Just anything paranormal, I'm always into it. So whether it's time travel or
So how did you get started with that? How did you get started, or did you already do that in a previous one?
Oh, I've always done it since I was young, and just always kind of reading and searching and, interested in all that kind of stuff.
What surprises my audiences the most is when they find out how many famous people that they know who believed in ghosts,
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan. Remember Reagan, the president? Ronald Reagan?
Yeah.
He believed in ghosts. He actually saw the ghost of Lincoln in the Lincoln bedroom, and he never went back in that room for 8 years. I already told you about Daryl Arnold Jr. Paul McCartney I don't know if you read that or not, but Paul McCartney said that his latest couple songs have been co-written by the ghost of John Lennon with him. Literally,
I didn't hear that.
figuratively. Yeah, Matthew McConaughey has talked about some of his experiences with ghosts.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln was certain that he spoke to the ghosts of his son every day. His son died at age 10, I think, when he was in the White House. He died of, I don't know, something we would have caught today.
Yeah.
He died very young, and Lincoln said that he talked to his son, the ghost of his son, every day. So there's a lot of people that, Madame Curie. Madame Curie is the only woman who has 2 Pulitzer Prizes, two Nobel Prizes for science, and she believed in ghosts. She's the one that discovered radioactivity.
Yeah.
And she believed in ghosts. So that's just a couple of examples of really famous people. I'm going, well, if those people who are smart and they're educated and they're knowledgeable and stuff, if they can believe in ghosts, well, then it's pretty reasonable for us to do the same thing.
Oh, for sure. Well, to kill off the rest of some time here with you, what would you like your legacy to be, with your writing and everything?
That's a really good question too, Jonathan. Well, I think one of the writers that I follow is another mystery writer called S.J. Roseanne. She's a woman. Again, a woman I met at one of the writing conferences. She taught me something that she said, nonfiction is about reality, fiction is about truth. So what I'm hoping I'm doing with my novels is sharing truths that people might not normally know. So as an example, all of my heroes are all teachers. So my goal is to show teachers doing the things they normally do, teaching and working with kids and stuff like that, but also portray them in a heroic fashion, so that the public can see them in a more positive light. Each of my books also deal with a serious problem that society is struggling with. So, excuse me, Blood on the Chesapeake was all about racial injustice. Crimson and Cape May, the murder ends up being tied to human trafficking. Scarlet at Crystal River is about the abuse of migrants in the South. And the newest book that's coming out, Red Shadows at Saugatuck, is actually, the murder is tied to MMIW. That stands for Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women. So there's lots of Native women that have been kidnapped, raped, murdered, missing at a rate 5 times that of white women, and nobody knows anything about that. Anyway, so that's what. And the one that you asked me about, the cruel lessons, that's really about student drug experimentation and abuse. So you're asking about my legacy. So part of what I hope readers get out of my books, besides a good mystery, besides an enjoyable ghost role, is they start learning about human trafficking, things they didn't know about, and start getting invested in that. Or in this new book, they're learning about missing, and I didn't know. In each of these cases, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about missing and murdered Indigenous women before I started doing the research on the book. So I'm hoping that my legacy is to open people's minds up to some other things that they didn't know about and that they should know about, that they should care about.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show and spending some time just talking and blabbing with me.
I'm delighted to do that. I appreciate anytime I can share my books, my point of view, my advice. I'm happy to do that. Are you going to show my website on your thing when you put this together?
Yes, I will, and I'll also put the link to your website on my website as well, because I have kind of a website for my business I'm trying to grow. So
Good.
I will
Okay.
put it on there as well. So
Okay.
I will have links for your books as well and all that stuff.
That would be great. Everybody can, my website's real simple. It's just authorrandyoverbeck.com. So anybody won't have any trouble pulling it up on Google or whatever other search engine they use. I really appreciate the opportunity to come along, Jonathan, and share my point of view from over here in Ohio. Especially today, it's a really, really, really cold day in Ohio. So,
yeah, I got family in Ohio, so I know all about that.
Yeah, 2 days ago it was 60. Today it's 20. We had snow last night. So 2 days ago we had beautiful sunshine. Could have played golf. This morning I woke up, there's snow on the ground everywhere.
Well, it's nice and sunny here in Washington right now, so I'm kind of happy about that.
Yeah, you should be. I don't blame you. Well, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate the chance to share my ghost stories along with your ghost stories.
I appreciate it. And, if I ever need a guest kind of out of the blue, I'll get a hold of you and see if you're willing to talk anymore.
All right. I'll do my best. Good to talk to you, Jonathan.
You take care, and I'll talk to you later.
See you. Bye.
Okay, people. So that's tonight's episode. A pre-recorded interview. It went pretty well. I mean, you could hear echo once in a great while, but the sound was pretty good. And then I got 2 minutes left to kill here. So, tried to, I didn't try to rush the guy and cut him off, but, and just kind of talked to him a little bit, and then he ended it in pretty decent time to, close out my show on the live. I'm just kind of happy to be doing these interviews now and guests and stuff. Still a little bit nerve-wracking. I get anxious and nervous about it, but as I get guests under my wing, I'll, be feeling better about this and all that stuff. So I look forward to, more and more guests, more and more people to talk to, more and more people to just discuss their careers, whatever else comes up on those days that I'm talking to them. Whether it's a specialty day like tonight was Time Warp Thursday, where we talk about paranormal and ghosts and spirits and all those freaky things. And then there's nights like Motivational Monday or Transformative Tuesday, where people would talk about mental health or bettering their lives or whatnot. The only 2 days that are just anything is random Wednesday, which is Wedgie Wednesday. Just talk about whatever the heck we want to talk about. And then finally Friday, whatever we want to talk about, So those are the 2 nights that are just open for whatever you want to talk about. whoever the guest is that night, kind of blabs. Like tomorrow night, Friday, March 7th, as you see scrolling right now, will be Hollywood Capone. So, it's going to be a good time. And then next week, March 12th, Wednesday, John Bukowski. And then next Friday, the 14th, James Buckman. So, but the guests, I'm lining up some guests and getting some guests coming on, so it's good. And, I will get better at this stuff. It's just, right now I'm new to it and trying to entertain my audience and whoever's watching. And just, give you guys something to watch every weeknight at 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for an hour. Kill an hour of your night before you go to bed or whatnot. And give you something to watch later on as well. So, I thank you guys for watching. I will be back again 23 hours from now, 11 p.m. Friday night with Hollywood Capone. He's an author as well, so we'll be talking about some books and just kind of chit-chat. So, I will see you guys then. Peace. Much love. Have a good one.